to support us. Make sure you continue to make prayer for us, and we're going to get up out of this.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right, y'all.
That day is finally upon us. Tomorrow we start trial. Tomorrow is that day we all been looking for. So alhamdulillah, man. Continue to keep us in prayer. Continue to shower your love and your support on us. We need it at this time right here, and we ask everyone to continue to be there for us. This is going to be a 3 to 4 week trial, alhamdulillah, and don't let a day go past that you don't make dua for, that you don't pray for us. And we will be victorious in the end, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Lil Durk's dad breaks down in court after realizing just how serious this situation has become, and if you know even a little about what this man has survived, you can understand why the moment hits so hard. Dante Banks Sr. spent nearly 26 years inside the federal prison system. He knows the sounds, the routine, the pressure, and the damage that comes with losing decades of your life behind bars. Now, he is sitting in a courtroom watching that same system pursue a case against his son that could potentially lead to a mandatory life sentence. The emotional weight of that moment is almost impossible to capture in one headline. Big Durk has already spoken, and what he said when cameras caught him outside the courthouse gives a glimpse into where this family stands right now. Stay locked in because there is a whole lot more underneath the surface.
Nobody was gonna disrespect Big Durk. Nigga, a legend. Daddy a legend for sure. A top slot for the GDs back in the day. So I'm saying like from the stories, because he been locked up down in Durk whole life. So I never met him. That's like Larry Hoover, no matter what. Nobody, nigga, I had somebody inbox me and ask me about Larry Hoover. Larry Hoover been locked up since motherfucking 73. Look at motherfuckers still represent him. A lot of motherfuckers on Larry, on the G. Ooh, they don't even know this man. So that's what I'm saying, so you know.
Today, we're breaking down the federal case surrounding Lil Durk, the serious charges he is facing, and the father sitting through it all while carrying his own painful history with the federal prison system. Let's get into it. To understand why Big Durk's presence at this trial feels so heavy, you have to look at his story first, not just his son's. Dante Banks Sr. was convicted on a federal drug charge and spent nearly 25 years in prison before his conviction was overturned and he was released in 2019. Think about that for a second.
He's right in front of his courthouse. And I see you working now. All right, this Big Durk, everybody, you know.
We know who Dirty Banks is.
We friends. We want everybody on peace and positivity. We come in every day and show our support to his family and his loved ones, his kids. And he innocent, y'all know?
We do know. Freedom boys.
Give us in prayer. We love y'all for support, man. Free Smirko, 3, 1, 2, 3.
While Lil Durk was growing up, finding his voice, making music, and building a reputation in Chicago's Englewood neighborhood, his father was behind bars. Durk was recording music, finding his lane, and eventually becoming one of the biggest names connected to Chicago drill. While his father was serving time far away from him, that absence shaped the family in ways outsiders could never fully see. It wasn't simply a father choosing to walk away, he was incarcerated, and those lost years could never be returned. The family had to deal with that separation quietly, carrying the kind of pain that doesn't always make the news.
All my life, they're trying to keep me down. On the time,
Then, when Big Durk finally came home in 2019, his son had already become a major star. Lil Durk had built an entire career from the ground up while his father was away. He founded Only the Family, helped develop other artists, worked with major names across hip-hop, earned Grammy recognition, and became one of the most recognizable voices to come out of Chicago's music scene. And now, years later, his father is watching another chapter of that story unfold inside a federal courtroom.
This is Lil Durk's father. We're at the courthouse.
else to do. Excuse me.
Yep, no problem.
Can't move around there on top of that. Like, you looking at the screen, then you look at it, you can see it. You say the first line, if it
Gonna take my phone.
They ain't told me that I could. No. I got a good video, y'all. Somebody got here.
No way. Somebody said, "Oh, you're too busy filming. You missed it." Yeah. The rest.
from the bay, huh?
Yeah. I was like, you look familiar, but I was like, that'd be crazy. Regime, right? Yeah. You know, with Lil TV. Yeah.
I can't pretend.
Yeah, live like 5 minutes away now, so we were like, yeah, I gotta pull up. Yeah. I'll be telling.
The reunion between father and son carried the weight of all those lost years, everything they missed, everything nobody could get back, and the hope that maybe the family could finally move forward together. But that feeling of having everyone back under one roof did not last long. In 2021, Dante Banks Jr., better known as D. Thang, was shot and killed. Big Durk had finally returned home after nearly 3 decades in federal prison, only to face another devastating loss within his own family. That kind of grief doesn't simply disappear with time. It follows you into the next morning, the next year, and every difficult moment that comes after. Now, that same grief is part of the emotional burden he carries while sitting inside a federal courthouse and watching his son fight to protect his freedom. That history matters. It isn't just some side detail added to the story. It helps explain why this trial carries such a different emotional weight for the Banks family. This isn't a father casually watching a courtroom case from far away. This is a man who personally knows what federal incarceration can take from a family, because he lived through it himself. And now, years after getting his own freedom back, he is watching his son face a legal battle that could once again put someone he loves behind bars. When Lil Durk's federal trial got underway, Big Durk made a move that showed just how much pressure he was carrying. The night before jury selection, he posted a video message on Instagram and spoke directly to supporters, relatives, and fans. He looked emotional, but he also appeared determined, like a father trying to stay strong while carrying an enormous amount of pressure. He asked supporters to keep the family in their prayers, surround them with love, and make dua or supplication for them throughout the trial. He explained that the proceedings were expected to last around 3 to 4 weeks, then expressed confidence that the family would come through it victorious, adding, Inshallah. That final word, meaning God willing, says a lot. It doesn't sound like someone claiming to know exactly how everything will play out. Instead, it sounds like a father recognizing that some things are simply beyond his control. He can pray, encourage his family, and stand beside his son, but he cannot control every decision made inside that courtroom. Look closely at that message, and you see a father trying to hold on to faith while facing a situation he cannot personally fix. After everything this family has already endured, that may be the only thing he feels he can truly put his trust in. He cannot take the witness stand for his son. He cannot cross-examine a witness, make objections, or stand before the jury and argue the case. What he can do is ask the people who care about his family to keep them in their prayers every morning, and that's exactly what he did. His message spread quickly, and underneath those words was something that felt impossible to miss. This moment is weighing heavily on him. He never directly said, "I'm terrified," so nobody should put those words in his mouth. But look at the situation from his perspective. A man who spent decades inside federal prison is now asking people to pray every day throughout another man's federal trial, expected to last 3 to 4 weeks. That alone shows how seriously he understands the stakes. So, what exactly is Big Durk sitting through inside that courtroom? Federal prosecutors allege that Lil Durk was involved in a murder-for-hire conspiracy connected to an alleged attempt to target rapper Quando Rondo after the November 2020 killing of King Von in Atlanta. King Von, whose real name was Davin Bennett, was one of Lil Durk's closest friends and one of the biggest artists connected to his OTF collective. Von's death was public, sudden, and deeply painful for people close to him. It became one of the biggest stories in hip-hop that year, and the emotions surrounding his death were intense. But prosecutors allege the story didn't stop with grief. They claim Lil Durk, allegedly motivated by retaliation, became involved in a conspiracy connected to an attempt on Quando Rondo's life. Prosecutors say that alleged plot eventually led to a 2022 shooting in Los Angeles. Quando Rondo survived, but his cousin, Saviaya Robinson, known as Lil Pab, was killed. Lil Durk has pleaded not guilty to the charges, and that point cannot be skipped. These are allegations made by the government, not established facts. Prosecutors must prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt to the jury. Nothing said during opening statements or presented through witness testimony automatically equals a conviction. The jury still has to weigh the evidence, and the case must be decided according to the law. That distinction matters throughout the entire trial. But here's where the pressure really starts to hit. Big Durk is sitting there as prosecutors describe his son's relationships, music, digital communications, associates, alleged motives, and alleged connection to the shooting. He is hearing the government present a version of events designed to support its criminal case, and the man listening to all of this has lived through the federal system himself. He knows what it feels like when prosecutors build a case around records, communications, financial information, travel details, and witness testimony. He understands that once those pieces are presented in court, every detail can carry serious weight. For him, this isn't just legal strategy playing out on a screen. It's his son's freedom sitting in the balance. He has been on the other side of a federal prosecution before, and that history is likely never far from his mind as he sits in that courtroom day after day. Now, his son's defense team is fighting to create a clear line between Lil Durk and the alleged shooting. The defense has argued that former associate Kayvon Grant, known as OTF Vaughn, acted independently, and that Lil Durk did not authorize the Los Angeles attack. The defense is challenging how prosecutors interpret communications, relationships, and other decisions they say point toward coordination. The goal is simple but crucial: create reasonable doubt about whether Lil Durk actually directed, approved, or participated in the alleged conduct. That's a standard approach in a federal criminal defense. You don't have to deny that something serious happened. The defense can argue that the government has not shown its client was responsible and that the evidence does not prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That's where the fight gets intense, especially when cooperating witnesses become a major part of the prosecution's case. One witness receiving serious attention in court is OTF Jam, a key cooperating witness for the government. Defense attorney Brian Steele pressed the lead investigator about how often investigators spoke with the witness. According to the testimony described in court, OTF Jam was interviewed 30 times, but only 3 of those interviews were recorded. Steele also established that investigators met with OTF Vaughn 10 times, and none of those meetings were recorded. And that's where the defense sees a major opening. The reason they are focusing so heavily on those missing recordings is pretty straightforward. When interviews aren't recorded, there may be less direct evidence showing exactly what a witness said from one meeting to the next. That can make it harder for a jury to evaluate whether an account stayed consistent, changed over time, or was influenced by the circumstances surrounding the interviews. 30 interviews with 1 witness and only 3 recordings is a major documentation issue in a case carrying enormous stakes. The defense wants jurors to understand exactly what that missing record could mean when they're deciding how much weight to give the testimony. When investigators were asked who made the decision not to record the interviews, the lead investigator pointed to procedures used by the U.S. Attorney's Office, but that answer didn't necessarily make the issue disappear. If anything, it gave the defense another point to examine. And every argument happening inside that courtroom is being watched by a father who already knows what federal prosecution can look like. Big Durk has experienced the system from the defendant's side. He understands how quickly evidence can become part of a larger government narrative, and he knows the emotional strain of believing you are innocent while prosecutors present a very different version of events. Now he's watching that same kind of battle unfold around his son. Watching all of this happen to his son is a type of pain that is hard to explain to anyone who hasn't lived through something similar. Big Durk is sitting there as a father who believes in his child, while also listening to testimony and arguments that paint a completely different picture of who his son is. Those two things can exist at the same time. A parent can love their child deeply, believe in their innocence, and still have to sit quietly while prosecutors present their version of the story. That's an incredibly heavy position to be in, especially when the entire process is happening in public. Every reaction can become a headline. Every emotional moment can be filmed, discussed, and picked apart by people who don't know what that family is actually going through. For Big Durk, loyalty, faith, family, and his complicated history with the federal system all matter here. They are part of the bigger picture surrounding this trial. Lil Durk has also spoken publicly about his father's incarceration, including through interviews, music, and stories about his childhood and the experiences that helped shape him. His father's long prison sentence became part of the foundation of Lil Durk's public identity. The importance he placed on family, loyalty, and standing by the people close to him became major themes in his music and his life. His experiences also gave him a particular view of the difference between life in his community and the world of law enforcement and federal prosecution. That outlook influenced his music, his relationships, his business moves, and the community he built around only the family. It also helped explain why so many supporters have remained loyal to him during this case. But now, some of those same themes are being examined inside a federal courtroom from a completely different angle. Prosecutors argue that the environment surrounding Lil Durk reflected a culture where retaliation and violence could be accepted or encouraged. The defense, meanwhile, is challenging the government's interpretation of his relationships, communications, and alleged actions. That's an important distinction because a belief in loyalty or family does not automatically prove participation in a crime. And that's what makes a trial like this so emotionally complicated for a family. Principles that may have helped someone survive difficult circumstances can suddenly be presented in court as part of an argument about criminal intent. Imagine watching values you taught your child being discussed as potential evidence against them. That's a brutal thing for any parent to sit through. Now let's break down what prosecutors say they have been using to build their case. Federal investigators have presented digital communications, text messages, social media activity, and other electronic records. They've also pointed to travel information and financial records as they work to construct their theory of a coordinated conspiracy. But remember, the existence of those records does not automatically establish guilt. The prosecution still has to connect the evidence together and convince the jury beyond a reasonable doubt that the charges against Lil Durk have been proven. Prosecutors argue that when all of these materials are viewed together, they reveal a pattern of planning and authorization rather than a collection of separate actions by different people. The defense is pushing back on that interpretation, arguing that the government's reading of the evidence isn't the only possible explanation. The defense has offered alternative explanations for certain communications, movements, and connections. Their argument is straightforward. Being near an event does not automatically mean you participated in it, and knowing people accused of violence does not automatically make someone legally responsible for what those people allegedly did. That difference is a huge part of federal conspiracy cases, and it's not always easy to understand. A person can have relationships with people who commit crimes without automatically becoming guilty of those crimes. The prosecution has to convince all 12 jurors that the alleged connection was intentional, knowing, and criminal. The defense, on the other hand, is trying to show that the evidence leaves enough reasonable doubt that the jury cannot reach a unanimous guilty verdict. That's the legal battle happening inside that courtroom, and Big Durk has a personal understanding of just how serious that battle can become. Then there is King Von, whose death sits at the emotional center of the government's theory. It's impossible to discuss this case without acknowledging the grief surrounding what happened. Von wasn't simply another artist connected to Lil Durk. He was a close friend, a brother figure, a collaborator, and someone Durk had built both personal and professional ties with. They came from similar Chicago environments, grew up around the same culture, and built careers that became closely connected. Their relationship went beyond music. For Lil Durk, Von was part of a small circle of people he trusted and cared about deeply. When Von was killed in Atlanta in November 2020, the loss shook the hip-hop community. Lil Durk's grief was visible through his music, interviews, and social media posts. He spoke about the loss and expressed emotions that made it clear how deeply the death affected him. The pain wasn't hidden. It was right there for everyone to see. But prosecutors argue that this grief eventually became a motive for retaliation. Their theory is that the emotional fallout from Von's death allegedly led to decisions, communications, and resources being directed toward an effort to harm the person they believed was connected to his death. The defense sees that situation very differently. Their argument is that grief, anger, or heartbreak after losing someone close does not automatically equal a criminal conspiracy. Feeling devastated by a friend's death is not itself proof that someone agreed to commit a crime. For the jury, the challenge is separating the emotional story surrounding Von's death from the specific evidence needed to prove criminal intent beyond a reasonable doubt. Feeling anger after losing someone you love is a human reaction. Allegedly, Additionally, coordinating a murder-for-hire operation is a serious federal crime. The prosecution's challenge is to convince all 12 jurors that the evidence points to the second situation, not simply the first. And for the family sitting through this every day, that means facing the possibility of another permanent loss. Big Durk already knows what it feels like to lose years of a family member's life to the justice system. He also knows the pain of losing a loved one to violence. Now, he is sitting in a courtroom while the possibility of his remaining son's freedom being taken away for life is being argued right in front of him. That's why the phrase "breaks down" needs to be handled carefully. It's powerful language, but it can also create an image that the available facts may not support. The deeper reality is that years of loss, fear, grief, and uncertainty can put an enormous emotional burden on anyone, whether or not that person has a dramatic moment captured on camera. And this brings us to something important. Social media has completely changed how people consume major legal cases, and sometimes speed comes at the expense of accuracy. A father asking his community to pray for his family during a federal trial is a deeply human thing to do. But once that moment gets turned into viral content, the meaning can quickly change. Suddenly, a prayer request can be presented as proof that someone knows the verdict is coming, has lost hope, or witnessed something shocking inside the courtroom. Those claims can spread fast, even when there is no evidence supporting them. The title of this documentary uses emotionally charged language, so it's important to separate the dramatic framing from what has actually been documented. Big Durk did not announce that his son's case was over. There is also no verified basis here to claim that he publicly collapsed inside the courtroom in some dramatic scene of grief. What he did do was ask people to pray, express his faith, and continue showing up for his son. That's already powerful enough. There is no need to invent an extra scene or add details that haven't been confirmed. That distinction matters because the family, supporters, and everyone following the case deserve both emotional honesty and factual accuracy. A federal trial can have enormous consequences, and the public should be able to understand what prosecutors allege, what the defense argues, and what the evidence actually shows. Online coverage can influence how people view a defendant long before a jury reaches a decision. A dramatic headline can stick in someone's mind even after the facts become clearer. That's why Big Durk's message is worth looking at for what it actually was: serious, emotional, and rooted in faith. It doesn't need extra drama to make an impact. And beyond the courtroom, this trial has forced a much bigger question about Lil Durk's legacy. Before these charges, he was known primarily as a Grammy-recognized artist, successful entrepreneur, founder of the OTF movement, and one of the most influential voices to emerge from Chicago's hip-hop scene. Now, his career and public image are being viewed through the lens of a federal case that could change everything. He built something that went way beyond making records. He created a label, a brand, a movement, and a community of artists and fans who connected with his story and heard pieces of their own lives in his lyrics. That image of Lil Durk hasn't disappeared, but now it exists beside a federal prosecution that presents a very different picture of what prosecutors allege he did. Whatever the jury ultimately decides, that complexity is now permanently part of his public story. The Grammy-winning artist and the federal defendant are the same person in the record, and no verdict can erase the fact that this trial happened or that millions of people watched the case unfold. Big Durk is watching that legacy change in real time from a courtroom seat where he has very little control. He cannot jump into the proceedings, correct every statement he disagrees with, or shield his son from the allegations being presented. For any parent, loving your child while being unable to control what happens to them can be an incredibly painful experience. For a father who already spent decades away from his children, that feeling carries another layer of weight. He missed childhood birthdays, teenage years, major milestones, and years he could never get back. Then he finally returned home and had to figure out how to reconnect with a family that had continued living without him. And here's the part that really puts everything into perspective. Big Durk has already experienced enormous loss connected to both incarceration and violence. He came home in 2019 to a son who had built his own life and career during those missing years. He tried to find his place in that new reality, then suffered another devastating family loss with the death of D. Thang. Now he is sitting in court watching his surviving son fight a federal case that could potentially result in a life sentence. That's the emotional weight behind the man sitting in that gallery every day. Look at the timeline for a moment. In the 1990s, Big Durk was convicted on federal charges and began what became a decades-long period of incarceration. Nearly 26 years passed. During that time, he missed major parts of his son's childhood, teenage years, early music career, first opportunities, and rise to fame. Then he came home in 2019. His son was already a star, and the family finally had a chance to reconnect. But the losses kept coming. In November 2020, King Von was killed in Atlanta. In 2021, D. Thang was killed. In August 2022, the Los Angeles shooting prosecutors say is connected to the federal case took place. Then came the investigation, indictment, Lil Durk's not guilty plea, and the beginning of a trial carrying enormous stakes. That is the timeline Big Durk is carrying with him when he sits inside that courtroom. That's the history behind his request for people to make dua every day. But nobody outside the jury can honestly tell you how this case ends. The evidence still has to be presented, challenged, and evaluated. Witnesses can be questioned, prosecutors can make their arguments, and the defense can challenge the government's theory. Ultimately, the jury will have to decide what the evidence proves beyond a reasonable doubt. Eventually, the attorneys will make their closing arguments, and then the jury will step away to deliberate in private. They will weigh the evidence, the testimony, and everything they have heard against the legal standard of reasonable doubt. When that verdict finally comes back, it could give this family something to build on, or it could change their lives in a way that cannot simply be undone. Big Durk understands those stakes better than most people in that courtroom. He has already lived through the ending of a federal case from the inside. Now, he is watching another federal case unfold from the outside, and being on the other side doesn't make the waiting any easier. Every day the trial continues leaves this family suspended between two possible futures, while he can do little more than show up, pray, and wait. And at the end of the day, the most powerful part of Big Durk's story isn't whether he had one dramatic breakdown caught on camera, it's the reality behind his presence. This is a man who already spent nearly 3 decades of his life inside the federal system. He carries the memory of those lost years, the pain of losing D. Thang, and the hope that his son sitting beside him can somehow walk away from this case with his freedom. He cannot control the witnesses. He cannot control the evidence, the arguments, or the jury. He can't make the process move faster, and he can't decide how anyone inside that courtroom interprets the evidence. What he can do is show up, sit behind his son, and hold on to his faith after everything this family has already endured. He asked people to pray, he said, Inshallah, and then he took his place in that gallery and waited. No matter what anyone thinks about the allegations, that's a heavy position for a father to be in. The trial is still being decided and the verdict has not come. The family's story is still unfolding, and nobody can honestly predict the final outcome before the jury reaches its decision. For Big Durk, though, every day inside that courtroom carries the fear of history repeating itself. He already knows what it means to lose years to a federal sentence, and now he's praying he won't have to learn what it means to lose a son to one. So what do you think? How do you see this family's situation, and what could the outcome of this trial mean for Lil Durk's future? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Keep the conversation respectful because this is a real case with real people at the center of it. If you found this breakdown useful, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who wants to stay updated as the case develops. And don't forget to check out the content on screen for more coverage and deeper breakdowns. We'll keep following the story as new information comes out.